On this episode of Inside MusiCast, we welcome one of the greatest voices in the history of popular music, Jon Anderson.
I looked out in the night, strange and startling was this voice of time to say there's got to be a linking of everyone, got to be a center, it all comes flooding back. And you and I clear crossing the shapes of the morning. Over the sun for the river, and you and I glide clearer towards the movement, and you and I gold over valleys of endless sea, on a sailing ship to nowhere, leaving any place. If the summer changed to winter, yours is no disgrace. Yours is no disgrace. Yours is no disgrace.
Jon Anderson, the original voice of Yes, has been creating music for close to 5 decades and shows no signs of slowing down. Jon is currently on the road with Jean-Luc Ponty and will soon reunite with Rick Wakeman and Trevor Rabin to create more Yes-inspired music. But that's only the beginning, as Jon's musical spirit is filled with galaxies of music, with his best work yet to come. Inside MusiCast is honored to welcome a music legend, Jon Anderson. Hey, Jon, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Good to hear you, man.
Hey, I've been wanting to connect with you for so many years, and I'm extremely honored to have you on the show. And I know our listeners appreciate you taking some time out to spend with us too. And speaking of time, I know we don't have a lot of time today, and so I want to focus on topics, not exclusive to Yes. I'm sure that there's no question you've been interviewed countless times in the past, and Yes is typically the focal point, I'm sure. So today I want to chat about recent and upcoming projects and other various topics about you. So let's start off with a recent project that I've grown to really love, and that being your connection to Jean-Luc Ponty and the album DVD you released as the Anderson Ponty Band. And, you and Jean-Luc go way back to the 70s when, he was part of Mahavishnu Orchestra, and I know Yes did some shows with them, and the two of you talked about teaming up even way back then. And, of course, years have passed and you finally reconnected a couple of years ago. And how did you reconnect and how did you manage to, carve out time out of your busy schedule to focus on this project?
Well, I'm always very interested in developing ideas and being adventurous. Mm-hmm. I was working with a friend up in Oregon through the internet. We work on MP3s to each other all over the world with different musicians. And he contacted Jean-Luc to perform on a piece we were trying out, and he did. And I got back to Jean-Luc, and very simply, I sang on some of his music. Yeah. And just sent it to him and said, What do you think? We should do something now. Yeah. It's like 30 years ago we met in 77, I think it was, when he was playing in Mahavishnu Orchestra. Yeah. So he said, and we went up to Aspen, got his band together, did a rehearsal for 3 weeks, put on a show, made an album, and that was it. And it was like meeting my brother. He's such a brother. We're very, very similar on many levels, and he sings with his violin. Right. And his voice, his violin, my voice, right, with him is just special to me. So that translates when you make an album. That's when you do a show, you perform. Right. And it always translates to the audience that, hey, we're having a good time. Yeah. We hope you are.
Exactly. Well, the album that with Jean-Luc is appropriately titled "Better Late Than Never," and it contains a combination of songs of yours and his. And tell me about the decision process for the songs that you opted to record for the project. I mean, I'd also love to know about the experience you had with Jean-Luc in creating these new arrangements.
Well, it was very simple because we were going to put on a show. Mm-hmm. There were going to be people buying tickets. About 1,000 people came to the show each night. Yeah. And basically, you want to give them, songs that they know, like Yes songs, of course, and his classics, plus the ones we wrote together, and the new songs we wrote for the project. So you're going to do Out of a Lonely Heart, you're going to do Roundabout, and you and I came later, actually, when we were on tour. We started performing And You and I with a tribute to Chris.
Oh,
Clark.
Yeah, nice.
And that was a very momentous occasion on tour. Yeah. You can evolve the show as you go along. Mm-hmm. And that's the great thing about working with Jean-Luc. He's very flexible, and his musicians are very jazz, rock, fusion. Right. They can do some African music. They can do some Tibetan music or Indian music for Long Distance Runaround, which is one of the songs that we do on tour. Mm-hmm. And that's what we did. We put a show together and put it on a DVD and a CD.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful. It was well shot. It sounds great. And the tour continues with Jean-Luc through the spring here in the States and I think some parts of Canada. And, your point a second ago is that, you kind of mix things up in terms of your set list. But do you guys change the show each night to make it interesting for yourselves, or is it pretty much the same show?
I think like anything, once you've got it's like putting on a musical.
Right, sure.
Once you've got everything in order, you stick to it. Yeah. Because the challenge is to create the order that works for the audience and the band. And once you've got that, like I always do with Yes, once you've got the order correct, you stick with it throughout the tour. And now and again, you might throw some new things in for a bit of fun. But, it's an ongoing relationship with Jean-Luc. We're talking about working this summer on a project for next year. Uh-huh. And very open-minded person, and it's very adventurous on many levels.
You just mentioned the band a second ago, and it's an extremely talented band, and it's mainly Jean-Luc's band. Is that correct?
Yeah, these guys are ridiculous. Yeah, they're so good.
They are.
We're so sort of grateful for what they do, you know.
Well, hey, John, if you don't mind, I do want to pause for a second because I'd love to play a track from your Anderson Ponte Band album titled Better Late Than Never. And this is the Yes track titled Time and a Word. And it kind of has a little reggae twist to it. From our guest today, John Anderson on Inside MusiCast.
Went to Jamaica, you know the story. I don't remember much about it, but I think I had a real good time. 69. So Bob Marley, Bob Marley, Bob Marley.
Word spread throughout social media recently regarding a newly formed collaboration between Rick Wakeman, Trevor Rabin, and yourself. And I've read that this new music is in the works and possibly a tour. And how much can you share with us about this at this time?
Well, I just know it's great music, that's for sure. I was with Trevor last week. He just finished a long project called 12 Monkeys. I think it's a TV series. And that drove him a bit crazy, making all that music for the last 6 months. We got together last week, and we actually put together the format for the album because we've been working on music for the last 3 months.
Okay.
Sending MP3s to each other. Same with Rick. So we have the format for the concert idea and the album idea.
Okay.
We might release it in 3 parts because
Okay.
there's some long music in there, long form music, which we enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time I worked with Trevor together was an album called Talk, which I loved very much. And I actually stayed at his house for about 3 weeks when we put it together in his studio.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going through the same sort of process now, 20-some years later.
Yeah.
And 25 years later, would you believe? And I'll be with him in June and July, finishing off the project, and then probably going on tour in the winter, spring next year in Europe. But USA, possibly later this year. It's a lot of discussion going on, but the music is projecting the idea, and that's the main thing, that we want to do something very, very different, very, very... We don't want to be, well, let's get together and do the old stuff.
Right,
you know?
yeah, exactly.
We don't want to do that. What we want to do is we want to revamp what Yes to us truly is. It's like I'm going through a sort of very strong affirmation that I had Yes in my DNA for 35 years. It never left me.
Right.
And I have an album coming out with a guy called Roy Stock
Yes, yeah.
in June. And it's a very, very sort of, it's so full of Yes energy, Yes music energy. And so I'm very excited about the future.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's exciting that you guys are getting back together again. I know, a good portion of Yes fans are interested in this. Of course, people who follow your music individually are really looking forward to this. And you just mentioned Rain Stolt and your new album called The Invention of Knowledge. That's going to be released on the 24th of June. I think that's on Inside Out Music. And this collaboration seems like, a perfect fit. His music is very reminiscent of Yes. It's very intricate, it's inspiring, and beautifully arranged. And, tell me about this experience with Royan and how the two of you first connected and decided to make an album together.
Okay. Well, actually, I was listening to it in the car yesterday, realizing it sounds like we're all in the same studio when we're recording. It just sounds so unique to me.
Right.
And we recorded everything through the internet.
Right.
Met him 2 years ago on a boat, what do they call them? Prog rock boat trip from Miami to Bahamas.
Right, yep.
Those kind of big boat things.
Yep, the cruise.
And I was doing my solo show and meet and greet with a lot of people, and then I met Transatlantic, and I actually did some songs with them at the end of the tour. The boat trip, and that's when I met Rania, and we got on very well. And that's when a record guy, Thomas from Inside Out, who was a big Yes fan, said, you guys together would be so cool together. And I said, okay, give me a call. I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Because I'm just busy,
Right.
And lo and behold, within a month, I started sending him music. And having listened to what he has done before, I realized he's a very good producer. So I just let him go ahead and do some of his music, develop the music, and I'd send him songs that I actually wrote maybe 10 years ago
Okay.
that I always felt were part of a large-scale work. And there's a 23-minute work, 19-minute, 16-minute, and 11-minute piece. So that's how, we're inventing ourselves as we go along. That's why the invention of knowledge came through as a good title.
Perfect title. Yeah, absolutely. I've listened to a lot of his music, both with Transatlantic and his solo work. And you're right, he has a lot of epic tracks. They're 25, 30 minutes long.
Player and very, very interesting musician.
Well, obviously I haven't heard the album yet, but I wanted to ask what we might expect to hear from it and tell us about the musical territory.
It's wonderful.
It's just it's
My
wonderful.
next step into the next life of my next 20 years of music. Some people asked me the other day, so what are you going to do next? I said, this is the time for my great music. Because it'd be stupid if I make music and say, well, it's never as good as, Close to the Edge, or it's not going to be as good as anything I've done. No, you always think the next music you're doing is just perfect.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, I agree
Or else
with
you
that.
wouldn't do it,
That's right.
So the great work is coming.
Yeah, because you created Close to the Edge doesn't mean you can't do it again and make it better. That's true.
Well, it's an evolvement. Without Close to the Edge, we wouldn't have Topographic Oceans. We wouldn't have done Revealing, Ritual. We wouldn't have done Gates of Delirium. We wouldn't have done Awaken.
Right.
And even Mind Drive was the last one we ever did in very early, late 20th century.
Right, exactly, yeah.
But Mind Drive is still a great work.
It is.
And I was listening to it the other day because we want to incorporate it with our work with a piece of music that Rick Wakeman has come up with, which is a very similar sort of attitude. So we might mold them together for the show. The idea is to, be adventurous.
And why not? Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, will the two of you tour? Maybe do some live shows in connection with this new album, Invention of
We
Knowledge?
talked about next summer doing some special events. It's very hard to know, but the more I listen to the album with Ronya, the more I think this would sound beautiful with a full orchestra and a choir and a lot of musicians and some incredible graphics and some incredible... Because originally, most of the songs were written for an idea for an installation that we are constantly reinventing ourselves on this wonderful planet Earth. And the new inventions that are coming via the internet, the computer, animation, we are really reaching such an incredible rediscovery of so much of our future, if you like.
Yeah.
So we went through the Industrial Revolution, and then now we're going through the technological revolution.
Yeah.
And it's bringing us closer to incredible events like holography. And it's a little bit like, we're living in the science fiction world now.
Right. Oh, yeah. It's.
I mean, I was thinking about this a couple of months ago, that the new flying cars will be drones with, basically drones, electronic drones, cars.
Yeah.
And I saw one on the front of New Car magazine the other day.
I think I saw that as well, and I know what you're talking about. And I guess that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll achieve that
Make
at some
sure
point.
it's electric so it doesn't make a damn noise.
That's right.
And the new NASA have come up with this new propulsion system based on magnetic force connected with laser energy. It's got nothing to do with sitting in a tin can. You remember that song?
Yes.
David Bowie.
Yes.
Here I am.
Yes.
sitting in a tin can.
We were all, of course, concerned about, as fans of yours, were concerned about your health a decade or so ago. And in fact, I heard you mention in an interview that you nearly died on a couple of occasions. But
Sure.
But since then, you've generated so much music, and so much that a large portion of it you haven't released. And tell me about your mindset, musically speaking. I mean, after your health improved and post Yes, I'm sure you treated this as a new beginning and a fresh start, right?
Oh, of course, yeah. I've been working on so much music, and then I got very sick through the internet. I was working through the internet with so many people
Yeah.
around the world. because I put an advert on my website, Musicians Wanted.
You're right.
And so many people sent their music, and I connected with so many people and realized that there is this incredible avenue of music that I'd never even thought about doing, very ethnic, very storytelling, and stuff like that. So I've opened up this incredible big door to a new world, musically speaking, and I'm running very fast and creating so much music for the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand part of that is you have several symphonies in the works, and most of them you've been creating for many years now. And can you tell us about these works, and will they see the light of day in the future?
Well, yeah, the symphonic work is it's an incredible process. I wrote the symphonic piece about 20 years ago, and it still sounds good. So, and it's all in demo form. It's keyboards and very ready to be performed by a full orchestra when the time comes. And then I wrote a piece for the idea for a choir and singing with an orchestra. That's something else that I was working on, and so many different kinds of orchestral pieces, generally working on keyboards.
Yeah.
So you create them. And even about 2 months ago, I started writing on a different level than I've ever tried before. And so I've sort of broke through a barrier, musically speaking, in my mind anyway. And that will take another 2 or 3 years to evolve correctly until that time comes when I can get together with the right people to be able to produce it correctly.
Yeah.
As I said, working with Rania on Invention of Knowledge, these are songs that I wrote 10 years ago with people, a guy from Liverpool, Neil Campbell, a guy near Philadelphia is Dan Spaulding, and another guy who lives nearby here, Christian, who I haven't seen them for, 8 years. And it's fun. You make music with people with Rania Stoltz. I've only met him twice.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're making music that is very, very, very warm and real and alive and fresh. And you think the world is a studio now.
No, you're right about that. It happens. A lot of people we talk to on our show, you either have to adapt to the technology, or you just have to, be disappointed in knowing things that aren't going to be the way they were in the past. And you're right. I think there's a lot of good. There's a lot of positive elements that can come from making music together this way.
Well, the great music is coming. The great music, not just pop music. Pop music's fun, but it isn't the great music. The heavens it's full. The galaxies are full of great music. We're going to be traveling the galaxies soon. You better believe this. Our grandchildren will definitely be.
Yeah. Opera is another part of your repertoire, and I know I read somewhere that you've been working on a project, and I love the subject matter. It's Bill and Hillary Clinton. Is that right?
I know. It's a very simple idea. Hillary gets to become president, and she has a visitation the first night she sleeps in the White House. She has a visitation from all the children from Vietnam that were killed and destroyed, and all the children of the wars, and all the children of the incredible, terrible destruction of the Native American culture.
Right.
And they come to visit her, and they sing to her and dance for her, and she eventually becomes this very evolved woman within the space of one night. So she goes and starts speaking to the press the following day, and they freak out because she starts to change the world.
That's really interesting. And how far along are you on this project? Is this?
Oh my gosh! Well, I actually wrote with this guy Jeremy, and it's been very hard to pin him down. But we wrote probably 3/4 of the work, and then I couldn't find him. He never wrote back to me. He had another life going on.
Yeah.
And it's kind of bizarre that things happen that way. I actually sent a near-finished piece to a company in North Carolina because they were interested in working on the project. This is about 6 years ago. It was when she was running for president against Obama.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and, you go through these things and try these things out, and if it happens, great. If it doesn't, hey, it wasn't meant to be, or it will happen when it happens, you know.
Recently, I was speaking to a friend, and I told him I was going to be interviewing you, and I was talking to him about these symphonies that you're writing, and his reaction was, "Wow, that's very cool that he's attempting to compose symphonic arrangements." And so, I thought about that for a second. I kind of countered with, but really, you've been doing that your entire career. Your compositions with Yes are, they're equivalent to the works of great classical composers, which I've always wondered how your journey in music began when you found your voice.
Well, it's a very mysterious thing to talk about, to be honest.
Yeah.
I was in the middle of Munich. I was in the middle of the English Gardens in Munich. And I was pretty well wasted in '67. I'd just seen Jimi Hendrix perform, and I was very, I would say, a little bit emotionally confused.
Okay.
Because I'd started to hear music, and I couldn't explain it to the guys in the band, so they threw me out of the band, or, well, they told me to go away in short, jerky movements, as Rick Wakeman would say. So I left the band in Frankfurt and went to live in Munich, and I was really spaced out.
Right.
But I could hear all this music, and I was in the middle of this beautiful garden, and a voice came to me and said, "John, everything's fine. Don't worry. Don't worry anymore. Everything's fine." And I went running back to the apartment that I was staying in, and there was a telegram from my mother, and it changed my life. And I still hear the music.
What was the telegram? What did it say?
There's a band in Frankfurt want you to be the singer in the band.
Okay.
And that changed my life.
Wow.
And somebody wanted me.
And how old were you at the time?
23.
So this is prior to Yes. This is prior to even the war.
And then I went to London after 3 months with the band, and I went to London, and then within 3 months I met Chris.
Wow.
And I was still hearing all this music. And I hear it every day.
Just came to you. Yeah, that's incredible.
Life is wonderful.
Well, you mentioned your mom, but you didn't necessarily come from a musical family, or did you? Were your parents musical?
Oh yeah, my dad was a radio DJ for a while, and him and my mother were ballroom champions of north of England, and there was music everywhere. And he played the harmonica. My uncle played the spoons. Very, very interesting thing. And so I was surrounded by music since I was a child. It's just one of those things I never thought about. And I was named after a very famous music hall singer who is called John Roy, the Melody Boy.
Interesting.
My name is John Roy Anderson.
Yeah, right. I knew that, but I didn't realize that you were named after John Roy, the Melody Boy.
Yeah,
that's cool.
It's a music hall, typical English music hall singer.
Well, hey, John, let's take one more quick break, and I do want to play one more track from the Anderson Ponte Band album. The album is titled Better Late Than Never, and the track we'll play here is a Yes track, and this is Wondrous Stories. From our guest today, John Anderson, on Inside MusiCast. This is kind of moving on a little bit, but I heard an interview with you last year with a Chicago radio DJ, and I can't remember his name, but he asked a question which garnered a response from you that was not necessarily surprising, but I was a little caught off by your answer, but I completely understand it as well. He said his question to you was if you were to introduce someone to Yes who knew nothing about your music, which song in your vast catalog would you play for them? So I was listening online, and so I pressed pause, because I wanted to take my own guess, and I had a feeling you wouldn't answer, with any of your more well-known tunes. So I crossed out just about every track on that classic Yes compilation, and I narrowed it down to Close to the Edge, Siberian Katru, and Awaken. And I chose Awaken, and that's how you answered. And what was unfortunate during that interview is that they didn't give you the opportunity to explain why that particular track was your choice, and I wondered if you can answer that for me.
Well, it's a wonderful work. It's one of my favorite pieces of Yes music that I was involved in helping to create. And I performed it with the Icelandic band and orchestra about 3 years ago and realized how wonderful it truly is.
It
And
is.
every time I perform it, I am on cloud number 9, I think. It's just something about that music. It's got energy from the Far East and the symphonic energy and very surreal sort of mystical energy. It's got so much classic ES work within it. It's a very special event musically for me, and I think for thousands of people around the world who actually saw us perform it.
In that particular song, the last 3.5 minutes is, to me, is like pure sonic magic, and it's, it kind of resolves in the final 2 minutes, and it really sweeps you away. Your angelic vocals, the swirling synth, Chris's pulsating bass there at the end, and it makes you feel like you're floating in some heavenly place, and you don't want to come down. And if I have any one complaint about that song, it's that it eventually ends. And I could actually spend an entire show breaking down this one song, but I just wanted to hear your summary of the final lyrics of the song. Like the time I ran away and turned around and you were standing next to me. And,
right.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned it earlier that I was sort of lost in Munich at a certain point in my life.
Right. Yeah.
And at that moment in time, when I was totally lost, there you were right next to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's happened on many occasions where I'm on stage doing the song Awaken, and I feel this incredible presence of energy, and it's from the audience. It's like they're getting it, we're getting it, we're all getting it. Where does this music come from?
Yeah.
We were so privileged to be able to help create it, and so on and so on. It's like a majestic piece of music.
It definitely is. Yeah, it's so beautiful. And I've been listening to it the past couple of days thinking about this interview, and it doesn't leave my head. It's still there. I sing it when I'm walking up and down the hall. But another thing is you're often asked about religion and spirituality in a lot of interviews that I've read and have listened to about you. And I've always been on the same page with you in regard to, your philosophy about how many rivers lead to one ocean. And it's a perfect analogy, to how all religions are essentially aspiring to one God. And, if I don't know if you've read this before, but if you've ever read Neil Donald Walsh's book, A Conversation with God, you'll find a similar sort of ideology in that book. And it really changed my outlook on life. And it spoke, to me about how I've always felt about life and who God really is. And much of your music has really been an avenue for you for your spiritual relevance as well.
Yeah, you grow as you get older with state of consciousness as to what you believe to be around you, what is the divine energy, what does it bring to your life, how many people are touched by it and constantly touched by it all over the world. Mm-hmm. It's not a very singular thing, it's a collective thing. We are all one, so we're all connected to it on many different levels. Mm-hmm. And that's what it is. It's a very mystical, wonderful knowing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned earlier in the interview that, you really embrace technology and use it to your creative advantage. And in fact, your last solo album titled Survival and Other Stories, you invited musicians from all over the planet to participate by submitting their own music. And you must have received so many submissions. And how did you go about weaving their music into your perception and ideas of your own music for this album project?
Well, it was kind of simple in a way that if someone would send me a minute of their music, I'd say, okay, send me more.
Yeah.
And they would send me more music, and if I connect with the music, I'm going to sing. And I write a song, and I send it back to them.
Yeah.
And they embrace it and add some production to it. And there we are working together. I don't know who the person is, but I know his music works for me. And that in itself is a sort of magical time when you don't have to think anything other than making music together,
Yeah.
And when the album came together on Survival and Other Stories, so the idea was to use all these songs that I've been writing, and it's like a dozen of 100 songs that I've been writing over that first sort of 6-year time period when I was working with people through the internet. And I was actually working on a piece this morning from a guy that I met in Canada who actually lives in London, and he's a reggae master.
Okay. Wow.
He keeps sending me these wonderful reggae tracks, and I sing them. And we've got a collection of 7 or 8 songs now over the past 3 years. And one day they'll come out. I don't know how or when, but I know that it's inspiring to me to sing about so many different things and with so many different combinations of music, even Middle Eastern music. I'm working with a guy who lives up in San Francisco. And we've written quite a lot of music in the last few years. And I just bumped into a local person here who works as a percussionist in a sort of ensemble out of the local university here at Cal Poly.
Uh-huh.
And they have a 20-piece, 12 singers and 12 musicians doing Middle Eastern music. So I'm going to get together with them and probably produce a project with them for next spring, next year. Because it's an ever-opening... Music is like that. It'll take you on so many journeys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you mentioned a second ago, you said you've worked with these people, a lot of them you've never met. I actually know one of the contributors to that album, The Survival and Other Stories, and he's a mutual friend. His name's Ryan Fraley. And
Ryan, yeah. Really beautiful, wonderful orchestrator.
Yeah. Well,
a great musician.
He lives here in my area. I'm from Indianapolis, and and I actually met him online as well. And in fact, you supplied vocals on a new arrangement of a Yes song, "It Will Be a Good Day," the river.
It's a good day, yeah.
Yeah, for his
album.
album.
Started doing sort of variations on many Yes songs as well, acoustic versions of Yes songs. And this is all part of the collection of music that eventually will come out.
Yeah.
My mantra is, it'll happen when it happens. Because people say, when's it going to happen? I said, when it happens, basically.
Well, did you get to hear the final result, the final mix of his track that he produced for his band, Wave Mechanics?
Yeah.
Yeah, it turned out really nice. I loved what he did with sort of the big band horn section there.
Oh, yeah. Very, very good.
A couple more thoughts here, and one is Chris Squire. And, you've been asked many times, I'm sure, about your thoughts about his passing and your final contact with him shortly before he left us. But tell us how Chris's music, his personality, and his friendship, both in good times and in difficult times, helped shape you as an artist.
Well, that's what I said to him just when I knew he was sick, and I sent him an email saying, without you, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing, so I've got to tell you, thank you so much for everything you did for me. There were so many times when I'd be rushing headlong into an idea, and he would sort of pull me back and say, let's try it this way. And I would say, okay, why not? And then it was the right way.
Yeah.
So there was this wonderful to and fro with me and Chris. As you mentioned, the end section of Awaken, it was always going to be a sort of repeat of the first third stanza, which were these wonderful chords that Steve had created, and up-tempo, workings of man set to ply out historical life, regaining the flower of the fruit of his tree energy. That was going to come at the end of the solo, but Chris said, let's do it in half time.
Oh, okay.
As soon as they played those chords half time, I started singing Masters of Images.
Right.
Songs cast a light on you. Of course, my whole world changed then, and I got to thank Chris for that. And it happened so many times.
Yeah. Well, it was you two from the very beginning, and you guys made so much great music together. And I actually wanted to mention that last summer I went to go see the Yes Toto concert tour that was going on, and I'm a big Toto fan as well. I know a bunch of the guys in the band, but I was so excited to see Yes because I hadn't seen them in such a long time. But
right.
and I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't go on record as saying this, but I just felt like the spirit wasn't there without you and Chris on stage. And I know you get asked this. You get asked this a lot, but I mean, is there ever a chance you might reunite? I know it's a trickier question than it is to answer, but do you want that? Would you like to be back with them again at some point?
It depends who them are, because I know
right.
that I'm working with Trevor and Rick now.
Right. Yeah.
In this process of life, you go through so many changes,
sure.
And I just go with it and see what's going to come at the end. And an obvious time could become when Steve and Alan could join us on stage or something like that. Or it's hard to say because Steve and Alan are the only people that I worked with.
Well, I hope to see that in my lifetime. I'd love
You
to see
never
it.
know.
Yeah.
You never know.
Well, just in wrapping up, I have to admit, you started it all for me in terms of my first concert experience. I saw the 90125 tour here in Indianapolis, and that was my very first show, and of course it blew me away. And I really loved your opening act, which I think the lead singer of Berlin was they were supposed to be the opening act, and instead you guys showed Bugs Bunny cartoons. And
Totally. That was my idea. I thought, well, let's entertain them with some cartoons.
I think they liked
Really?
that. I think the
Yeah,
crowd
because
they loved
everybody's
it.
probably stoned anyway.
That's true. Cool. Well, and one of these days, John, I want to meet you. I hope to shake your hand someday because I'm a huge fan, and I don't really gloat too much when I interview musicians, but you're one of my heroes, and I just wanted to say that to you.
Thank you. I wish you well.
Take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Special thanks to John Anderson for joining us on this episode of Inside MusiCast. We'd also like to thank our correspondents, Kim Riley, Brian Pearson, Scott Gross, Loretta Sassaman, Scott Sheriff, and Don Breidup, for their continued support and content development for Inside MusiCast. Inside MusiCast is powered by Cabello Associates and Earshot Audio Post. For Eddie Cabello, I'm Rick Such. Thanks for listening to Inside MusiCast.
She brings the sunshine to a rainy afternoon. She puts the sweetness in, stirs it with a spoon. She watches for my moods, never brings me down. She puts the sweetness in.